Okay, I don't think this will come as a surprise, but I love synthesis. I love using technology to generate sound from nothing, and then using that sound to serve musical and other expressive purposes. There's so much to dig into in synthesis that one can dedicate their whole lives to it, and many have. There are all sorts of wonderful, sophisticated, and complex ways to manipulate sound. But in this video, I also want to say it's not that complicated. Now, I'm definitely not saying this to disparage the field, I'd be out of a job. But while we can list an enormous number of synthesis techniques, I want to make the argument that we can break these all down into a few super categories. What's the point of that? Well, having fewer categories, or at least acknowledging that some of these synthesis techniques are highly related, might help people who are just getting started, and even help those of us with more experience better conceptualize what's happening and help us to innovate. I want to advocate here for 5 large categories of synthesis: sample-based and wavetable synthesis, additive synthesis, subtractive synthesis, modulation and distortion synthesis, and physical modeling synthesis. Now, I've gone into most of these categories in more depth elsewhere, so I'm going to keep this brief, give some justification for these large categories, give some examples of synthesis that fall under these categories, and leave you to dig in more to any specific idea on your own. So first, I've lumped together sample-based synthesis and wavetable into a larger group. In both of these synthesis techniques, we're using memory, digital or otherwise, to store information about a recorded waveform and play it back. Simplest idea of this is a sampler, triggering samples. Wavetable synthesis is another level of this. We take a very, very short, arbitrary recorded cycle of a waveform, and then we cycle through it at different frequencies to play it back. Also under this category of sample-based and wavetable, we can place granular synthesis. This is just another kind of sample-based synthesis. But in this case, we're playing back very, very short parts of sound. Again, it's just playing back a recorded sound, but further manipulating it. Also under this category would be LA synthesis, linear arithmetic synthesis, where transients of samples are mixed with subtractive synthesis. Then of course, all of the relatives of wavetable synthesis, multiple wavetable synthesis, wave-terrain synthesis, vector synthesis would fall under this category too. My next large category is additive synthesis, creating complex sounds by adding sine waves together at different frequencies, amplitudes, and phases. We think back to the Hammond organ or even the telharmonium as simple examples of this, and building to more sophisticated examples of spectral synthesis and resynthesis. Next, subtractive synthesis, adjusting frequencies and ranges of frequencies using filters. This is our traditional Moog-style East Coast synthesis, but also, as I mentioned, subtractive synthesis also plays a role in vector synthesis and LA synthesis. Also in the subcategory of subtractive synthesis would be formant synthesis, creating resonant points in a sound spectrum to create vowel sounds. And of course, many synthesizers that do wavetable synthesis also have a filter in there for subtractive synthesis too. Next, I have modulation synthesis and distortion synthesis. The most well-known idea here might be frequency modulation synthesis, like in the Yamaha DX7, but also amplitude modulation, ring modulation, PD synthesis, phase distortion synthesis, which was Casio's answer to FM synthesis. But also in here would be ideas of wave shaping and wave folding. Here, overall, our idea is taking a simple waveform like a sine wave or even a triangle wave, and then modulating it or wave shaping it to create a more complex waveform. Different than adding sine waves together like in additive synthesis, and also different than removing and adjusting parts of the frequency range like in subtractive synthesis, because we're starting with simple waveforms and making them more complex. Finally is physical modeling synthesis, where we actually try to recreate how physical strings or bodies would vibrate in the real world. This includes karplus-strong synthesis, digital waveguide synthesis, but overall the strategies for producing sound in this way are different than these other large categories of synthesis I've mentioned. So again, sample-based and wavetable synthesis, additive synthesis, subtractive synthesis, modulation synthesis and distortion synthesis, and physical modeling synthesis. To me, thinking about all synthesis techniques as falling into one of these large categories helps me to understand new ideas when I encounter them, and helps me to understand what I'm doing and what ideas that I'm combining together. As always, categories don't exist as buckets for us to throw things in. Instead, they exist as a framework for helping us understand. As I hope you take away from this video and all my videos, we're usually combining multiple types of synthesis and all the sound design or instruments that we put together. And if putting things in these categories isn't useful for you, you're always welcome to ignore me. That's all I got for today.